Hi, everyone, and welcome to Adult Forum. I'm Mother Cameron, and I'm here to help do a recap of the path for the last 2 weeks. For chapters 5 and 6, I was offline and on retreat, and I failed to get the summaries up for the last 2 Sundays, and so I hope to this evening catch me up so that for Sunday this week when we do chapter 7 that we'll all be ready to go. So yes, we will have adult forum this Sunday the 7th. It is All Saints Day. It is our anniversary Sunday here at St. Patrick's, and the bishop is coming because we're going to be having confirmation that day, but we are still going to meet at 11 o'clock on Zoom for adult forum. So I hope to get us caught up to be ready for chapter 7 Sunday, and then I will do a new review for us. So where we were the last time for one of these videos was we had just finished chapter 4. We had heard about Jacob and his dreams and his wrestling with the angels. And then we heard the story of Joseph and how his brothers sold him into slavery. They were jealous of him. He was daddy's favorite. And so we hear the story about Joseph being enslaved and then in prison in Egypt. And the Pharaoh is having these dreams, and he hears that there's a guy down in the prison who is able to interpret dreams, which is Joseph. And so Joseph is brought up to consult with the Pharaoh. He ends up rising in power as a consultant to the leadership and within the kingdom. And so there's a famine in the land. The brothers come to Egypt seeking rations and help, not knowing that their brother's still alive. And Joseph recognizes them and provides for them and says, go get daddy and bring him back. And they all end up having this great relationship with the Pharaoh. And it is because of Joseph that the Israelites and the Egyptians have this good working relationship. Well, Joseph grows old and he dies, and things start to change. There's a new Pharaoh that has risen into power who really doesn't care about Joseph, doesn't know about Joseph, doesn't want to know about what has happened before. And the Israelites are brought into slavery under this new regime. And so the Pharaoh has put out a decree that he's trying to reduce the number of Israelites. And so they're killing all the male children. All the boy babies are meant to be killed at birth. But there is this one baby that's born, Moses, who the midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, spare. And so Moses' mama then takes him and puts him in a basket, as the story goes, in the river to try and save her baby. And the sister, Miriam, a young girl, who follows the baby in the basket down the river. And the Egyptian's daughter, the Pharaoh's daughter, finds the baby and decides to adopt him basically, and take him back to the palace. Well, Miriam is there to witness all of this and comes rushing out to say, do you need help? Do you need someone to nurse the baby? And I happen to know someone. And so that's how Moses's mother becomes his wet nurse. And not knowing that it's his birth mom, supposedly she is then brought up and able to continue to raise her son as like a nanny kind of thing. So anyway, so then we learn about the birth of Moses. Then we learn about his flee to Midian, where he sees how badly the Israelites are being treated, and he is aware that they are his kinfolk. So we are guessing that he is getting two stories, two narratives about who he is growing up, right? One from the Pharaoh's daughter and one from his nurse, from his mother, that you are an Israelite. And so he sees what is happening to his people. So Moses flees into the desert, and he is called by God through a burning bush, right? And so the story talks about how he's out tending the flock, and he's taking his daily walk with his sheep, and he has to turn to be able to see the burning bush, and God calls him to save the Israelites. And Moses is like, surely you don't want me? It's part of our call narrative, right? You don't want me to do this. Surely there's someone else that can do this better. I don't talk so good. Why don't you ask my brother Aaron to do this? God's like, nope, want you. And Moses says, well, who am I supposed to tell them sent me? And we get this new phrase for God, and one of the names for God was I am. And so God says, tell them I am who I am sent you. Right? So God, who is the God, sent you. But then Moses was like, all right, well, I'll tell them that you sent me, but then what if they say they don't believe me, or they don't listen to me, and they say, well, God didn't actually appear, the Lord didn't actually appear to you. And so God tells him to throw his staff down on the ground. It turns into a snake. He picks it back up, becomes a staff again. There's this whole thing with his cloak being a healing cloak. And so God performs these miracle acts with Moses to help show him that I am the Lord, and I am is going to be with you. So Moses returns to Egypt, that he would take his staff and he will perform signs. And, you're going to speak for, God will speak through him to the people. All right, so he heads back, he takes his wife and his sons, and he puts them on a donkey, and he heads back to Egypt, and Moses carries the staff, and you're going to perform all these wonders, Moses. Well, it happens to end up being this thing of the plagues, and it's like a battle between Moses and God, and the Pharaoh and his magicians, trying to figure out, like, well, God did this, well, we can do that too, say the magicians. Here's how they turned the river red, and they just did this magic trick, right? And so there's this battle back and forth between which are things really sent by God, or is it magic? But then there is this plague, the 10th plague that comes through, that God is going to, in retribution, God is going to kill all the firstborns, Egyptian firstborns. So here's where we are. Excuse me. Moses tells all the Israelites to go out, that God has said to go out and get an unblemished lamb and to kill it. And here's how you're going to cook it. And here's how you're going to eat it. And you're going to spread the blood over the lintel, over your doorpost. And that way the plague will know not to come to your house. That this plague, based on the blood over your doors, will be able to determine where to go, which houses to enter to take the firstborns from, which becomes the story of Passover that our Jewish brothers and sisters still celebrate today. Okay, so that's where the story ends. Moses is still in Egypt with the Israelites, and the plagues are coming through. So we had some questions. There's several questions in that chapter afterwards for you to review, but some of the ones that we discussed in our small group time in our breakout sessions was this. Moses is taking his usual daily walk with his sheep when God appears to him in the burning bush. The Bible tells us that Moses had to turn aside to see and encounter God. So the idea is like, well, how many burning bushes had there been before Moses actually pays attention? That Moses actually has to turn aside to be able to see this burning bush. Had there been more of them? And then he just finally noticed. But what does this say, this turning aside to be able to see God? What does that say to us about how we see and encounter God? And have you ever yourself had to step off the normal path in order to experience God more fully? And what's that like for you to have to turn or adjust to be able to experience God more fully in your life? The other thing we talked about was the idea that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And what does that mean? Is there a difference between the two descriptions? One where it says the idea that Pharaoh himself hardens his heart, or the idea that God hardens the Pharaoh's heart, and how does that affect that? What are the ideas that we have seen in the Bible about hardened hearts, and what does that mean about for us and how we experience hardened hearts? Either someone's heart has been hardened towards us, or that we have hardened our own hearts, or our own hearts have been hardened towards someone or something else. So we had some discussions about hardened hearts. And then lastly, we talked about the idea of Passover, this being the first Passover, the institution of the Passover meal that Jews observe. That you may see some similarities in the story to that of Jesus's final days. The Last Supper that Jesus shared with his disciples was likely a Passover meal. We read about that in the Gospel of Mark. A branch of hyssop is used to feed Jesus sour wine when he is crucified in the Gospel of John. And then also in John, we hear that Jesus referred to as the Passover lamb. So how might we understand these parts of the Jesus story in light of this original Passover meal, of what is happening in Moses's day with the Passover, and then how that is portrayed again within the Jesus story? All right, so before I wrap up chapter 5 with you, I want to share with you some of the artwork for that week. Okay, let me see if I can share my screen. It's going to be messy for a second while I get to it. But all right, and we need to get to chapter 5. It's chapter 4. Here we go, chapter 5. All right. So I am who I am. Here's the Moses mosaic. You may recognize it from the Sunday news that week. This is Moses down here in the bulrushes. I assume that is his mother, since he's clinging to her breast, and then the Pharaoh's daughter, right? All right. And this down here at the bottom, it says, and the daughter of Pharaoh said, this is one. And she names him Moses because she, the one brought out of the water, is what his name means. Here's another pen and ink by Dore of the finding of Moses. Here's another Moses. We got a lot of Moses in the water images this time. Again, that goes back to our Jesus story, right? About the cleansing pen, what happens with water. It's a big symbol for us in our faith. Here's God in the burning bush, a Bourbon painting. You notice Moses is barefoot, and that is one of the reasons, because God tells him to take his sandals off. You are standing on holy ground. So you may have noticed there have been a couple of times here where I even celebrated. I kicked my shoes off because the idea of the altar space being holy ground. I have some clergy friends who kick their shoes off before they enter the church building, right? Or into the sanctuary, seeing that as living out this idea of being on holy ground. Again, another picture, more contemplative, Moses here before the burning bush. And then this one, the Transfigured, and I'm going to hope I get this right. Father Stephen was sharing with us about the idea of the horns, that if they were making saints, because this is an icon, and there was this idea about making saints out of Old Testament figures, that they had to have something else on them. And so that's actually what these horns are supposed to represent, is that it's a symbol that it's a before Christ saint. You also see back here all these little faces. So you've got the heavenly host here with God, with I am. Okay, and then here's chapter 6, the continuation of Moses. So we're going to come back to that in a bit, and we'll look at those two. All right, so chapter 6. We moved into the continuation of the Moses story. And really, I'm going to be honest, the fact that we've covered all these years of exile and Moses in the matter of 2 weeks, when it took them years upon years upon years, is kind of astounding. All right, so chapter 6 was actually titled "The Waters Were Divided." Right. Okay. So the plagues have come. Moses keeps saying, "Let my people go." Great song if we can all sing it. So after the final plague, the death of the firstborn son of every Egyptian family, the Pharaoh finally relented and let the Israelites go. They packed up that very evening and started out just as God had told them. As they traveled, God went in front of them in a pillar of cloud by day and led them along the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, so that they might travel by day and night. But their journey was not to be an easy one. So they have left, and the Pharaoh decides to send his officials after them. His officials come to him and say, "What have you done, letting these people leave your service? Basically, we need them. How is the country going to run?" And so the Egyptians pursue them with horses and chariots and chariot drivers and the army, and they overtook them camped by the sea. And so as the Pharaoh draws near, Moses and God have been in conversation clearly, and Moses says, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, for the Egyptians who you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to keep still." So we hear the story about the angel of God. It was going before the Israelite army and moved to behind them, right? So we talked about there was the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night that was leading the way. Well, this entity, the idea of the angel of God that had been leading them towards the promised land, now comes around from behind to defend them from Pharaoh's army and chariots that are coming at them. So instead of leading, it's now at the back to defend. And so Moses stretches out his arm over the sea, and the Lord drives the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters are divided. And here's where we get the story of the Israelites crossing into the sea on the dry land, and the waters form these walls on either side, right? And they walk through, and then as Pharaoh's army comes through the chariots, the waters are returned. And so it's this very you think kind of like the creation stories. We think of like the Noah story of the waters rushing in and death and destruction by water. And so there's also a part of this where there's this, and I can't remember if it's a midrash or if it's actually biblical, but it's the idea that God wept for the Egyptians too, because those were also his people, right? God has created all human beings. Then he has just lost some of his children into the sea. So that grieved God too. So, and then we have this great, the Song of Miriam. Aaron's sister took a tambourine in her hand. And so the sister has become a prophet too. Moses' sister has become a prophet too. And all the women went out with her with tambourines and dancing, and they sing this song, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." Then we get to the Israelites complaining in the desert. They complain to Moses and Aaron. And we've heard about this in church, right? About Moses, the Israelites complaining. "We're tired. We're hungry. We're thirsty. We're going to die out here. We were better off as slaves than being out here in the wilderness." And so God says, "All right, you're hungry." Moses tells him, they're complaining. God says, "I've heard the complaining of the Israelites, and you shall eat," right? And so we have this idea of the manna falling from heaven. And then we also get the quails that are sent because they get tired of just bread, like, so give us something else to eat. And then they have twice as much bread, but they're supposed to consume it, and not say that that God will provide enough for every day, the idea of our daily bread. So I'm assuming y'all talked about that because I wasn't there. And then you get the story of the 10 Commandments, Moses going up on the mountain, and God giving the 10 Commandments. And then you also get the idea of not being able to, he breaks the tablets when he comes down and sees what they've been doing, drops them in anger, has to go back up the mountain and get the 10 Commandments again. And then we get them wandering in the desert some more, and they get to Mount Nebo, which is what Father Stephen actually would have preached about last week. So I'm hoping y'all had a good discussion about that, that they're in the plains of Moab at the Mount Nebo, and Moses is able to see the promised land, but does not actually get to go into the promised land. That Joshua is the one who will lead the Israelites into the new promised land. So that's the story of Moses. Y'all got, wandering in the wilderness forever in 1 week. All right, so some of the questions to ponder were, when God rains down manna from heaven, the people are instructed to only take enough food for each day and nothing more, but they find it difficult to do. Why do you think God asks them to do that? Why do you think it's so difficult? And then another one was, Moses leads the people for 40 years, sticking with them even when they grumble, complain, and sin. Yet he doesn't get to see the people take it all the way into the promised land. What do you think about that? What might that say to us about our own service to God? That we are able sometimes to be a part of the planning and all the labor, but we don't necessarily always see the fruits of our labor, that those can happen after we're gone, and or after us. All right, one more thing was, the journey of the people of God features amazing deliverance, but it also involves wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. When has your own journey with God felt more like wandering? And how has the experience of wandering impacted your life? So there's some things for you to ponder as well. And then I'm going to share, there was just really brief artwork for chapter 6. So this is it. So you get Moses on the stained glass, God giving Moses the tablets, the 10 Commandments. We've talked about these recently in church, about how the first 4 were about how to love God, and the other 6 on the other tablet were about how to love your neighbor. And that was kind of like the how-tos. And then here is the Israelites worshiping the golden calf, which I left out of my recap. But so Moses is up on the mountain. The Israelites start complaining to Aaron that Moses has abandoned us. He's never going to come back. We need a God. The other one is too scary and left us. Anyway, so Aaron kind of, I feel like as a joke, says, all right, you want something to worship? Give me all your gold and I'll melt it down and make it into a golden cow for you. And the people are like, okay. And so they have made this golden cow, and God sees what they have done and gets mad. And Moses actually ends up defending the people to God, to say, you don't want the Egyptians to say, well, he just brought them out here in the middle of the desert to kill them. And so Moses comes down and they turn back to God. But for this brief period of time, they worship a golden cow, a golden calf. And this is where Moses breaks the tablets because he's mad and has to go back. And now I've got to go get the 10 Commandments again. Thank you. So he breaks the original tablets and has to go back. If you notice from last week, Father Stephen had talked about the horns on saints. Moses here has horns again. And you'll have to ask him for a better description about the horns. I don't remember the whole story, other than they were put on Old Testament saints. All right, I think that's actually, yeah, it was all the pictures they had for this time. So they are not, that's the end of the Moses story. So this week with chapter 7, Moses was a pivotal leader for the people of Israel, but he's not their only one. So this Sunday, we will hear the story about Moses' successor, Joshua, who will be the one to finally lead the people into the promised land that God has foretold since the days of Abraham, right? But what the people find in that land isn't quite what they expected. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what it is that they find in the promised land and what that looks like. And clearly, we're going to talk about the wall that fell down flat too. All right, so thank you everybody for joining, and I will see you on Sunday. All right, take care. Bye-bye.